Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emily Sophia, and I'm going to be walking you guys through the latest of Bates Motel. So spoiler alert before we dive into the mad thick of things, as I will be bearing all in this review, and I would just like to say a quick thank you to pretty much everybody on the block. Number one, the channel is super close to 6,000 subscribers as I'm currently filming this, which is kind of an exciting thing, I should say, to think that 6,000 people have come around to hang out and listen to me rant and rave for hours on end. That's quite a thing. You guys are true soldiers in my book, and furthermore, thank you to all of you who watched my latest Game of Thrones review, breaking down the Purple Wedding. That was all kinds of fun. So if you missed that and you are watching the show, there's a link to that video in the description. I'm really looking forward to the rest of that season. Well, I've got no further ado to throw your way, so let's kick it. Let us get into the depths. This was a stunning episode, and I've said that about a couple of them this season. I have, because it's been a really fantastic chapter in the story so far. I mean, a couple of sort of episodes of building and little situations that are all kind of one thing leading to another. Not anything hugely climactic for a time, but we got a little taste of that action tonight, because not only do we see now how Dylan's subplot is coming into the mix, how that's tying back in with what's happening with his family, or at least I theorize that it will, but we see that the whole situation that happened with Norman and Cody and her father, that whole incident, the sheer purpose of that occurring in the story was so that they could, number one, get Norman's DNA, and number two, match it to various shenanigans of the past, namely the missing in action Miss Watson plot that we'd all kind of forgotten about over the course of the season. Is the last time anything even happened in that regard, it was basically, it was Romero had snagged a guy, or he had matched a semen sample or something. So, because there's a couple of different samples that they got. Again, one that they weren't able to match to anything in their database, one that they were. And of course, that outlying figure apparently has proven to be Norman, which comes as an enormous shock. Honestly, of all the things that we thought transpired, I mean, did any of us think that he would go that far? Or is there any possible way that he can get out of this? Or that this is something, is there any way that Norman didn't actually do the deed? That's the big question of the hour. And of course, as we've had Norman progressing further and further into his blackouts and into this alternate self, we wonder just what exactly he's capable of in these states, and how they are going to be conducive, or will they be conducive to the Norman that we're going to see at the end of days. So that's something that we'll go back to at the end of this review. As for now, let's traipse through some of the other interactions and events of the episode. What I really enjoyed about tonight was just how interconnected everything was. Even though I'd kind of been feeling like the stuff that was going on with Dylan was feeling a bit on the superfluous side, I've been the most focused on and invested in the crises of the Bateses, because they pretty much have the most interesting atrocities. You know, so I like to see what's going on in that department, and Dylan seemed to kind of just be on the periphery, yet intentionally so. He's basically running from everyone in his life in this attempt to find himself by removing himself completely from his family. But we had a little scene with Emma touching base with him and trying to reel him back into himself, like, hey, your brother is in prison, your mom is on the fritz. How about you come and lend a helping hand? And of course, Dylan is only focused on himself in the situation. Now that his past has been laid bare before him, he feels that having been lied to and ganged up upon and forced to move on from a situation that is still wrecking his entire existence. So his response to what I think is a very gracious request or suggestion on Emma's part is extremely on the selfish end of the spectrum, but I see where he's coming from. And Emma delivered a really powerful line at the end when she stomps off and is like, man, I wish that I had a brother and mom to shit all over. Whatever it was that she said, something along those lines, but oof. I'm glad that Emma's finally getting some really meaningful moments again. We haven't had to see her in Cupcake Boy, and honestly, I prefer her apart from him because we get to see her in the Bates family fray. Again, that is where things are the most interesting and fascinating and enthralling in my book, okay? So, all that to say, we see that Zane is kind of sneaking around. He's playing the game. He knows what's going on with Dylan and Jody, his boss, and plays the whole you might get your heart broken card, but that doesn't really seem to be much of an issue at all as far as that plot goes in this episode. Really what it's about is bringing things back to the weed wars, that Molly is getting people a little bit antsy, territories have been infringed upon, tensions are high. Zane is basically getting creative with the situation and is getting ready to lay siege to Nick Ford's place in order to send a message. Dylan has been placed in a position of authority over Zane. It really seems like kind of a tenuous arrangement. The fact that Zane knows the entire breakdown and then flips the whole situation on end really puts Dylan in a sour place. So not only is he getting his head knocked in for not wanting to play along with the game, but I think that ultimately the implications of what happened here, if Nick Ford knows that Dylan is involved with the people who raided his turf, he could take that out on Dylan's family. And I mean, I think that he knows that Dylan is connected to them. Again, it's White Pine Bay. Everyone's in this cozy little cluster of potential tragedy, and so I don't think it's a far step to say that he could try to exact his revenge, send Dylan and Zane's group a message by going up against Norma, who's already crossed him in getting involved with his stuff and then pulling out at the last minute. So, lots of shenanigans ensuing. I like that we have some kind of way of seeing how this subplot is connected. And then, of course, we have the whole situation with Norman's temporary, not exactly incarceration, but the endeavors to keep him from being implicated in this crime, when in fact behind the scenes of all that we're getting the DNA readings from the other cop gal. I do not recall her name, but she's the one who took Norman through the initial process, getting him checked in. He's really antsy, on his toes, trying desperately to get everyone to say, hey, it's an accident, it's an accident, it's an accident. And what's interesting about the whole outlying, if not central issue of the blackouts is the way that Norma acts about them. So it all begins with Cody having this first-hand experience of seeing Norman's blackouts. Norma also having experience, but again, she finds ways to deny and skirt around that, and she has pushed those skeletons into the closet found a nice little box for him, or for them, and she's going on her merry way. Or at least as merry as things can be in White Pine Bay if you are a Bates. That's all I can say there. Anyways, so it starts with Cody going to Emma, going to Norma, Norma connecting the dots, freaking out on Norman and trying to put up a facade of merely protecting and loving him when in fact she is the key to Norman knowing exactly who he is. So there's the struggle for him to understand the situation that Norma is blowing out of proportion in an act of trying to save him, but that's not gonna cut it, because he needs to know what exactly he's capable of, and he can't shake that desire to know himself, to get what's going on. So occasionally Norma's frantic nature works to her benefit and allows her to get what she wants. But in this case, she's only further agitating the son whom she is trying to calm. So it's this whole, basically, you're trying to defuse the bomb, but you've got the match lit. So here you are holding up the flame to the wires that you're trying to cut, and one way or another something is going to erupt, and we see that we're pretty much right on the cusp of their relationship going to taking a quick little trip to Cuckoo Banana Land. I'm excited and nervous all at once because we got to see a lot of volatility from both Norma and Norman. They're dancing this crazy dance where one of them is trying to placate the violent other, and they shift roles in a heartbeat. And I think that is what the writers want us to see, because it's in that shift we see. For example, Norma's exuberance over the end of, well, what is just one investigation. She doesn't know a damn thing about what's coming with the next. But she gets the news from Romero. She runs up the stairs to celebrate, to lay a little bit of loving on her son, man, dude. And of course, so she's trying to placate him. He's playing things off in a subtle way and then reveals what happened with Cody's last encounter with him. So she goes complete 180. I mean, you could smell the smoke from the burned rubber on that turn that she just pulled, and she goes full rage mode on Norman again in what she thinks is an act of protection. It's really tragic to see those 180 turns that she makes, because they're almost childish in a way. And again, that speaks to Norma's past traumas in her attempts at protecting herself by protecting Norman. So when the way that she freaks out on him, saying that she knows more than anyone else and she doesn't have to answer anything, and therefore making her the container, the be-all end-all of knowledge. But it's just slightly terrifying in so many ways. One is constantly reaching for or smothering the other. And of course, we had several encounters where all three of the men who are after Norma's heart are in the same vicinity, and I dare say that is more than a recipe for disaster. That's pretty much the appetizer dish for the feast that is this Armageddon of crazy. It's just, I'm gonna need to watch this episode again. It was a lot to take in, and I like that. You know, I like when my brain has to go into hyperdrive to try and pick up on all the nuances of what's happening. You know, we have the scene where Norma is seeking comfort from George, the whole, why are you so nice? And then of course right at that moment Norman and Romero walk in, the tensions that abound. Again, it's all really crazy, and I'm interested to see how Norma is going to react. I feel like in this episode, the way that her character is manifested, she seems every ounce as crazy as her son is going to be. I mean, was I the only one who noticed the crazy, heightening, suspense, terror music after Norma encountered Cody in the bathroom at the police station, and she's looking at herself, the camera's zooming in? That doesn't seem accidental to me. I mean, I don't know if that necessarily, like, well, Cody's heading to Indiana now, so I don't really see Norma going out of her way to retaliate against Cody, someone whom she is glad to have out of the immediate picture, but who played a role in the, you know, the trickle down of truth to Norman, something that he might have been kept from. But again, it heightens the differences between Norman's relationships with the other women in his life and his relationship with Norma. Because again, with Cody and with Emma, both of them, the way that they approach the situation of the blackouts is, I was worried about you. I wanted to have this transparency, whereas Norma is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. It's all about that lack of transparency, which kind of is almost, maybe this might be a stretch, but it's that lack of transparency that Norma craves for the sake of building this slipping fairy tale. It's symbolized by Norman's very blackouts, his lack of transparency, his inability to be transparent with himself. So it's really interesting to see this kind of like light-dark dichotomy that's going on. You know, the dark with him and Norma, and then the light with him and others. And he is consistently, we see him pushing Norma away at every possible chance that he gets. And Norma's sheer desperation in the face of that, as she's trying to get in to see Norman, and she keeps telling Romero, I just want to see Norman, I just want to see Norman, I just want to be with him, he must have been so scared, he must have been so, and so on and so forth. And then at every chance he gets, Norman tries to push her out, because I think, you know, I think that her franticness wears on him. He wants to be able to see the situation in his own way, and she's got this whole other thing that she's bringing to the picture, something that's making him begin to question his own identity. So they're both kind of basically just linking arms and skating towards the edge of the universe, which we'll see if they fly off that precipice by the season finale. We're getting a third season. I don't know what exactly that's supposed to be at this point, because it sure as hell seems that we are ramping up the action. Yeah, but what this episode basically was just a series of the two of them constantly shifting places. They're spinning around, and they're weaving through people, and they're just like it. I'm trying to think of some kind of way to conceptualize their relationship right now. I don't even know. Oh man, oh no, it's just bad. Everything's just bad. It's Anyways, what else to discuss? I'm feeling kind of bad for George. He doesn't know what in the halibut he is getting himself into with anything. What I was gonna say is, for all the times that Norman drives that invisible fence between him and his mother, and that scene where he sees her clinging on to George, you could see the steam pouring out of his ears, like the mushroom clouds ascending. Like, that is also something to consider as well, that Norman is desperately trying to fight her off. We saw earlier on in the season, you know, when they were laying in bed together in that one scene, and he asks her, "Have you told me everything?" That's regarding her, but she's got a whole different set of encyclopedias on her son, which now he is trying to break into, figure out what's going on in that department. The fact that there's all this hiddenness, and then her being with George, and that's something else that is hidden from him. So it's this push-pull, 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 like tug-of-war status, such that whenever they come in the center, we never know what that collision is gonna look like. Is it going to be all this ridiculous sexual tension released on accident? Is it going... We just have no idea how it's going to manifest itself, again, whenever they're in that place of switching, of jealousy for one another, one trying to placate, one trying to detonate. I don't know how else to explain it, but we see a lot of that in this episode, and the ways in which the two of them are paralleled with one another. And I don't recall, did Norma, she found the necklace that Norman kept? Did she even bring that up with him? I honestly don't remember, because I feel like she found it, and again, I think she tossed that in with the skeletons in the closet. So when the whole Miss Watson thing comes back around, ooh, I do fear for the world's safety a little bit, a lot of it. This is the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is the way the world ends. You see all the billboards about, you know, the wrath of God is coming. Where is your soul? Well, we've got some metaphorical ones of those in White Pine Bay, so if you're ever driving through, just know that you are in peril. You're in the splash zone of whatever is about to go down. So I think it's really fascinating, the whole way that the situation with Cody was handled. I don't know if she'll come back into the picture, or if she has basically served her role. Again, this whole situation was a catalyst with Norman exercising his rage against, he reacts to Cody in a way that's similar to the anger that he has with Norma. He's working his way through all these people trying to get to some kind of truth, you know. And then the situation that occurred with her father, the accident that ends up implicating him in something that was not an accident. So finally, we're opening that old can of worms back up. I'm excited. I'm excited, because that was my one complaint about the season, is what happened to this plot line. Because it doesn't seem like something that you just forget, being that it's one of the first major situations of whodunit, in which we're trying to figure out how far in the rabbit hole is Norman. So we'll see how that situation gets exposed. Again, I don't know how much longer this show can last if we keep having these experiences, but I feel so bad because, I mean, in this episode, with the little exchange that Romero and Norman have in the whole questioning process, he's like the closest thing to a father that Norman even has. In this town, pretty much nobody gets to have fathers. It's like, it's slowly turning into a city of orphans, really. I mean, I think that even Norma is herself an orphan. And so that's where we kind of see, of course, Norman's crazy case of his Oedipus complex come in. And then it's interesting the threat that George poses to this order in the process of Norman and Norma pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling. Okay, scary thing that I saw is that scene where Norman was frying the egg before he tries to, the first time he tries to confront Norma about who he is. The camera pans up and we see him wearing the apron. It looks like he's wearing a skirt. I dare say a little bit of Psycho foreshadowing. Yeah, there's so many moving pieces in this episode. Adorable moments with Norma and Emma and Norman and Emma. I'm nervous to see, you know, she's kind of playing this liaison figure right now, which I think that we really need, because otherwise everybody would just kind of be ricocheting all over the place. She's kind of like helping to solidify these ties. And then we see how Cody's kind of served her narrative role. She was a really interesting figure for Norman, and the loss of her accompanied with this little hint that he is more than who he seems. And then the Romero and Norma and Norman and George dynamic, and there's a lot of moving pieces. I feel like I'm playing one of those crazy pinball games, and I'm trying to, you know, look all over the game board and see what's lighting up and where the ball is going when. And, oh, here's another one in the mix. You know, it's really exciting stuff. So please feel free to fill in any gaps that I may have left. I'll respond to comments as soon as I possibly can. Thank you all for being brilliant, beautiful, shining stars. That's pretty much all I've got. God bless the Bateses, come what may. Thank you to Vera Farmiga and Freddie Highmore for keeping things fresh and furious, and for making us want things that we don't. Don't kill each other this week, but, you know, before the next episode, that's all I gotta say. Thank you all for joining the discussion. Much love, and I will be back before you know it. Take care, guys.